Healthcare and senior care is fraught with problems and challenges, but we're also seeing some amazing new clinical treatments and resources. This show will help illuminate and uncover the good, bad, the ugly in order to equip patients, families, and other healthcare providers. Welcome to Senior Care Confidential.
Good afternoon. It is Halloween afternoon. Got a lot of trick-or-treaters coming tonight. My neighbors on both sides like to dress up as witches. Their house is very scary. They've got tombstones in the yards. Just freaks out the kids, and they come to Joe's house with all the pumpkins and smiles and rainbows between the two houses. But today we are talking about a news story earlier this month about a funeral home in Colorado where 118 bodies were found that had never been properly buried or cremated.
It's amazing.
It's a horrible story. So if we can roll the tape on this funeral home.
Something terrible has happened at the Colorado funeral home yet again. The sheriff in Fremont County says his deputies found human remains stored improperly at a funeral home east of Pueblo.
Yeah, this sounds pretty serious. 9 News reporter Cole Sullivan is in Penrose tonight, where people are waiting to learn more about what happened to their loved ones.
People here in Penrose don't know what happened. They don't know how long human remains have been improperly stored inside the Return to Nature funeral home behind me. And they don't know whose remains they are. The sheriff's office isn't saying. But slowly, pieces of the mystery are starting to come out. Police tape around a hearse is not the only sign something is wrong here. Neighbors say they've noticed a smell.
Depends on which way the wind's coming, but never paid a whole lot of attention to it.
Didn't pay attention until the sheriff's office and FBI showed up. People who trusted this funeral home want to know what's going on.
There's a lot of other people out there right now, just like me, who spent the morning crying.
The sheriff's office set up a special hotline for people with questions about loved ones. This Return to Nature location's registration with the state expired last November. The other location in Colorado Springs has an active license and no complaints, but no one came to the door, answered the phone, nor replied to our email. The funeral home advertises green burials, where bodies are not embalmed and are sometimes interred in wicker caskets. That's all legal. Colorado has infamously few laws regulating funeral services and is the only state that does not require licenses for funeral home workers.
I feel so sorry for the people, the families.
Now, families here wonder and worry what more they'll find out. Lawmakers we've talked to say they already plan to introduce legislation to regulate people who work in funeral homes. As for what happened here, the sheriff's office plans a press conference tomorrow morning. Tonight, jail records do not show the people who own the company in custody. In Penrose, Cole Sullivan, 9 News.
So here at Senior Care Confidential, we talk about news stories. And this one particular news story, when I saw it on the news, I just about died, pardon the pun. But I was so shocked. I cannot imagine being a loved one grieving and you find out mom or dad is in a pile of bodies.
Rotting.
I mean, it's just so horrible. And the worst thing is there is really no regulations in the state of Colorado. I know with home care, which I did, Texas has more regulations than any other state other than Florida, regulations to make sure that you're providing the very best care you can for our seniors. So you would think with a funeral home, there would be tons of regulations. So today we have a very special guest, Logan Roberts. She is a social worker representing Distinctive Life in Dallas. They have an excellent reputation. We are so honored to have you here today, Logan. I love that you're a social worker and are working with grieving families, and that's got to be very rewarding, as difficult it as can be. So tell us what led you to working into the funeral industry.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. This is exciting and fun to be here, especially on Halloween, talking about an industry that people may associate with Halloween. I got into this field because I had experienced numerous loved ones passing away without any plans. And I was on the much younger side, so I didn't really understand the intricacies. And then my owner, Zane, has been in this field and has just kind of been talking to me about it. And I finally decided to switch over from taking care of children and infants in the social work world to taking care of families and our aging population.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So I remember when my grandparents were probably in their 50s. I was a little girl, but they bought their plot at Restland, and they had everything planned for their death. That was part of what you did, as a mature, responsible adult. So they had their plots. They knew what they wanted in their services. They knew where they were going to be buried. And made sure the family knew what their wishes are. And, I remember when my granddad died, it was so traumatic for my grandmother, but everything was already in place and already done. And all she had to worry about were the flowers and the obituary in the newspaper, and that she was allowed time to grieve. And so I look now, as a hospice nurse, so many families had hours for their loved one to take their last breath, and they have absolutely no idea.
It's a scramble.
It's a scramble and you are at the mercy of the funeral homes. So walk us through what percentage of people pre-plan for a funeral?
Sure. So the national average is about 40%, which is not as significant as we would like it to be. And I just want to applaud your family for taking the steps to pre-planning, because it takes that burden off their survivors and their loved ones, like you said, so they can really focus on starting that grieving process. We really want our families to spend that whatever time that they have left with their loved one with them, cherishing those memories, holding their hands, being there, brushing their hair out of their face, helping them, in whatever way that they can, rather than sitting at a table making those final arrangements.
That's awesome. So walk us through the process. When you've received a call, let's say from a hospice chaplain in a family, that a patient has passed and the family has decided to go with distinctive life. Walk us through what happens.
So when we get that call, if they don't have a pre-need in place, it's a very chaotic, quick-paced environment. There's over 125 questions that have to be answered in that initial meeting with that funeral director. Things like, what's your social security? What's your mother's maiden name? Where was your father born? What is your father's middle name? If they're in the Jewish community, would you like a shomer? Would you like the Hever Kadisha? Do you want the Tahara? So there's a lot of questions that are thrown at them all in a row, because you're on somewhat of a tight time frame to take care of your loved one. So when we receive that call, we reach out to our care team, who comes and takes them into our care. And then at the same time, our funeral director is reaching out to the survivors and the loved ones, arranging that first meeting. Once they come into the office, all these questions have to be answered, in addition to, what did your mom want? Did your mom want to be cremated, or does she want a burial? Are you planning to scatter ashes? Are you guys going to divide the ashes among you? Do you have a plot? What kind of casket do you think mom would want? Is she environmental friendly and wants one that's going to decay faster? Or do you want one to match her personality? So there's a lot of individualized questions that goes into the process. And once the family selects that, then that's our job, is to coordinate and carry out all those plans. So I like to say we kind of jump in and play party planner for that final party, celebration of life, whatever comfortable term you like to use. And we arrange with the cemetery, with whoever's going to officiate at the ceremony or the service, and all the loved ones to coordinate
Okay, so 4 out of 10 have a plan in place. I mean, so 6 out of 10 on average. Are you finding that's consistent with y'all's too?
Yes.
Is that they come in without a plan, and that these are the ones that are having to scramble to get things handled?
Yes, and not only the emotional side, but the financial side. we don't like to talk about death and dying, and so we don't talk about the things associated with it. So it is not inexpensive to die, and it can be, the national average, varies greatly depending on where you are in the nation. But on average, a cremation can be $1,200 all the way up into the $6,000 to $8,000 range, and for a traditional burial, it can go up into the $30,000 range, and that money's all expected to be paid at the time before your loved one is buried. So the logistics of getting that money together and how are you going to pay for that?
So I would like to say that I'm pretty darn prepared. Like we've got living wills and trusts and wills, and my wife has all the passwords and all this kind of stuff to all of our stuff. But this is one thing when we invited you on the show, I realized I had not done before, because you don't really think about it. We talk, she and I talk about verbally about, what do I want done, and I want to be cremated, and I want to be involved because I don't want any blood. I want to make sure I'm dead before I go in the thing. And so she knows this stuff, but like there's no plan for that. So what's the recommended age, or is there one? Should we be doing this like right alongside doing our wills and our living wills, or is this something you can wait until later? Like what do you guys recommend?
Well, you've taken the good first step of creating your living wills and your estate planning and your power of attorneys and all those things. But yes, we should be thinking about taking that a step farther and planning for the finality of that end of life care. So what I tell people is it's never too young to start planning. Unfortunately, it's the only thing in life that is guaranteed at this point is death. And I always challenge people, if you find the fountain of youth, come back and let's share it with me. But right now, the only thing in life we can guarantee is death. And we have all these different insurances and policies and plans for the what ifs. What if we get cancer? What if we get sick? What if we get in an accident? We have all those insurances, but we don't think about the guaranteed and pre-planning for that.
That's a great point.
So we really encourage people,
So what does that look like? So I go over to y'all with my spouse, and we would say we want to put a burial plan, or it's not a burial plan for cremation, but it's a moving on plan, whatever we want to call that. And so we come visit with you guys. You guys will then go through the whole questionnaire stuff with us? Yeah.
So we plan we get as many answers as we can before time. So we answer about 99% of the questions that a funeral director would ask at the time of someone's passing in the pre-planning session.
Wow.
You get to select all your casketing and all your flower arrangements and how you want your service to be carried out. You can even select your music. If you want an organist, a harp player, I don't know what they're called, a piano player. We really walk through the process from start to finish. And that way you're making that decision for yourself. And if you have someone with you, your partner, you guys are making those decisions together, and you're not leaving that burden on your children.
Sure.
And then we also talk about the pre-funding piece. And there's lots of different options in the way that you can pre-fund it.
Okay, so Logan, let's go back to the news story. And I know the story said that Colorado didn't really have many regulations. What are some regulations in Texas that makes you the best the high standard?
So like you said earlier, Texas in everything, I feel like, has some of the highest standards for regulations. We are licensed and under the surmise or guidance of the Department of Insurance, the Department of Banking, and that is specifically geared towards the pre-funding and pre-need planning. And then also the Texas Funeral Commission regulates the laws and regulations regarding burials and cremations.
Okay. So how often do they come and inspect?
So we get audited at least once a year.
Wow.
We're more frequent than we are.
Yeah.
Ours used to be every 2, now it's every 3.
Yeah, at least once a year, someone comes and audits our files and makes sure everything is the way that it should be.
Okay. And they go through the room with the bodies and...
they go through the files and then they do a walk.
Did you really just say that?
I know, it's true. I mean,
the room with the bodies,
Colorado had all those bodies, The
idea is you're not supposed to have those.
Well, I just think of those TV shows with the rooms you go in and they pull, like in the hospital shows.
Morgue.
This is the hospital morgue versus.
I know. Well, that's just what I imagine. Yeah. That when they get to the funeral home, they go into a little place.
Well, and you're not alone in those thoughts. When we give people tours of our funeral homes, I think that's what they're expecting, is what we see on TV, the morgues with the rows and rows of the cold lockers. But really, that's not the environment that we have. But when they do come and audit, they look at our files. They do a tour of the funeral home to make sure everything, there are chemicals involved when caring for the deceased, and so making sure that those are, where they need to be and away from the living, and protected and kept in the right places.
You guys do all that stuff there on site, the embalming, all that?
So we partner with some different companies throughout the Metroplex to do that. So we do have we have a prep room with a small locker, a cooling locker, so that when we're doing our prep, that it helps the decompensation from happening. Yeah. So we have all those in place.
So I'm in my 40s. I plan on being here for another 60 plus years.
Great.
So I'm putting a plan together now. How does that work? Is it like an insurance policy that I'm paying into if I prepay for stuff? Is it specific to your location? Like, what if I move? Like, so when I'm thinking about
why
like
would the
60
bank
years
be involved?
So these are all really great questions. So when you pre-fund your pre-planning, so I like to differentiate the difference, because you can pre-plan and write down your final wishes, but you want to take it a step farther and pre-fund it and go ahead and pay in towards that final invoice.
Okay.
And so what we do is, the reason why we are regulated by the the Department of Insurance and the Department of Banking is because we use a third-party entity that holds the policy members' money, and we don't get payment until we've carried out services and we've sent them the invoice for all of the services that we've performed.
Even 50 years ago.
Wow.
And it locks in the rate of today's pricing. So that's a financial benefit. The benefit of using a third party is it protects your money from going to places it shouldn't. And you also lock in your choices so that your loved ones aren't left guessing and feeling guilty. Like, should I have done this? Should I have done this one? I don't really know. So there's lots of benefits.
What about in the case of moving? So I live in Texas.
Yes.
I hope to be here when I pass away. But if we move to, I don't know, St. Louis or Kansas City or Florida, and my kids live there and I want to be there, is there a way to transfer that?
Yes. So the pre-plan, that's the other benefit of going through that third party. We use a company called Homesteaders. Is it's transferable anywhere in the United States.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thinking about safety, I know a lot of patients, families that have a loved one that dies, during the funeral, they hire someone to be at the house. Do you all recommend that? I have heard there's a lot of theft or risk for theft when family members are at a funeral.
So this is one of my safety soapboxes I get on. So we all love to share news, whether it's positive or negative, with everyone, right? However, I'm a big proponent of safety for the reasons that you said, which is why we do obituaries on our website, so that it protects that confidentiality, and the family is free to share that with whomever they want rather than the general public in a newspaper. Because there are people that do look through the obituaries for that specific purpose of going and causing harm to the family while they're grieving and going through the hardest time of their life. We also recommend, when we're discussing plans, whether it's pre-need or at need, encouraging them to have someone that they trust in their home while they're at the funeral home, and just being extra cautious, around the funeral time and those first couple weeks and months.
Never have even considered that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a problem.
It is. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And a lot of times there have been like hospice volunteers when I worked in hospice that would go if they didn't have anybody and just stay at the house and clean up and wait for the equipment to be picked up or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that's a nice service to offer.
It is. That's really great that hospice, that they have volunteers that can do that too.
So tell us, share a story of someone, just a situation that you found joy as a social worker working with a family. Do you have anything to share?
Sure. So everyone asks me how I do what I do daily, because they think that I'm constantly surrounded by death and dying, which I am. But the way that I view it is I am there to help the living. I am there to support their survivors and their loved ones through what is probably going to be one of their, unfortunately, worst days of their life, losing a loved one, whether it's expected or unexpected. So I really take pride on walking the family through that journey. We have a lot of families that come back to us because they're so appreciative of how we walk them through as many times as we need to about the process and what's going to happen and support them after that burial. Okay, what's the next step? Because for a lot of aging population, maybe their husband passed away and their husband was the financial person that took care of everything. So really helping them understand, okay, this is what we need to do and this is what accounts we need to help you take care of. Here's the steps, and really walking them through that.
Are there legal documents with this? Like, is it attorney? Like, we got to do notary of public or whatever for these documents for the pre-death stuff?
So your living wills and your estate planning is the legal documents that kind of direct the attorneys in the legal system where to how to split your. Correct.
How about for y'all's end though? On the dying side.
On the dying side?
Yeah, so the contract or whatever the agreement is that we come up with.
The pre-need plan? Yeah, it's
the pre what?
The pre-need plan.
Pre-need?
Yeah, it is honored and held by that third-party entity.
Got it. Okay.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes.
So my granddad, he was from a very poor family in Alabama, and he always talked about his sister and 3 brothers. Always talked about them, their names. We knew their names, how they grew up, like what they played. His big story was, they saved their pennies to buy a bike from one of the neighbors. And by the time they could afford it, it was too small for all of them. I mean, they were really poor. But I wound up going to the Archive Museum in DC. My son and I were there. My son had a college visit, and we wound up going to this Archive Museum and looked up in records death certificates, like from people in our family. Like, there's marriage certificates, there's death. Anyway, my granddad had twin brothers who were 3 when he was 14. His other brother was 15, one was 12, 11, and his sister was in that age too. But we never heard anything about those twin brothers. So I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if they both got sick and died or they were given away. But it was very cool to see in the archives that he had younger brothers, and we don't know what happened to them.
And that's one of the neat things about the death certificates is that's what they use for those genealogy websites. So it's not only to document a loved one's passing, but it's also so that you can go back and trace that ancestry.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah,
like I wish I could go back and ask, Granddaddy, why didn't you talk about him? But he was obviously ashamed, embarrassed, and I don't know what happened to them. But I always wonder. But yeah, they were in that.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
On that death.
How does someone get in touch with you guys? If they're like me and they feel like they had everything until today, we felt like we had everything in place and now realize, oh my gosh. So how does somebody go about getting in touch with you?
You can just call the Distinctive Life office, and that phone number is 972-424-1144 and ask to talk to me or another pre-need specialist. Or if you have someone that is imminent, we would love to help you out and get that plan put in place for them as well.
Very good.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
this has been great information. And I know it's a hard topic to talk about, but it's so important to make your wishes known.
Absolutely. And I just encourage everyone to have these conversations with your family members, even your children. They don't want to hear it, but they will be very appreciative when your time comes that you've at least had that conversation.
For sure.
That's great. Thank you, Logan, so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.